All right, thank you. I wonder how many, we can't see a show of hands, but I wonder how many of you got on tonight thinking, we're going to have song service. How are we going to do that? Well, we're not doing song service. They contacted me, the elders contacted me late this evening and said, hey, can you lengthen your sermon? Well, what preacher can't lengthen his sermon? Matter of fact, the difficulty is shortening it. But I hope that you've had a good day. I know that the weather may be treacherous out there, so be careful if you have to get out. If you don't have to get out, just stay in and enjoy the blessing of being able to stay in and stay warm. I want to talk to you about a lesson that I had planned for this evening, and we'll have another one next week. But I want to talk to you about time. I'll tell you a story. Natalie Altry lived in Littleton, Colorado. She was going home one day from work. She'd been work and she was going home, and she was in her community, in her subdivision, her area, and she was driving 30 miles an hour. It was a beautiful day. And so she had both windows down in the front of both sides, passenger side, driver side of the car. And as she was driving through a community, enjoying looking at all the houses and the beauty of the landscape and the breeze that was coming in the window, all of a sudden, a bat flew in the passenger window, flew straight through the car, clipped her nose as it went out on the driver's side. And when Natalie got through, she said, you know, it all happened so fast. I didn't know what had happened until it was all over. There's many stories like that, isn't there? Life happens fast. We are given time. And, you know, the psalmist reminds us that the days of our years are 70 years, and if by reason of strength, 80 years. But then he reminds us in Psalm 90 that we're soon cut off. We fly away. Time, as we know it, is a measured and measurable period through which an action or a process or a condition exists or continues. We measure time. Now, we measure it in seconds, we measure it in minutes, we measure it in hours, we measure it in days and weeks and months and years. But we measure time. And so many times you'll hear folks say, well, now we got a lot of time or we don't have much time. I can give you 5 minutes here, or I can give you 10 minutes there, or your appointment is at 9 o'clock. Or I did this activity for this many minutes or this many hours. We measure just about everything we do by time. Last week when our son was here, and he had asked his mother about how far some place was from our house, and she told him. And later on, he asked me about some place, and he said, you know, kind of where is it? And I was kind of telling him where it is, and he said, well, how far is it from here? And I said, well, it's about 25 minutes. And he said, is there anywhere in Nashville that you can get to that's not 25 minutes, whether longer or shorter? In other words, I guess we had told him everywhere to go, well, it's 25 minutes, just 25 minutes. Well, we measure time like that, and we have to understand about time, that time really is valuable. Your time is valuable. We studied back a few weeks ago, John 7 and verse 33, in which Jesus told those that were there with him, he says, yet a little while I am with you. Jesus understood the value of time, that we don't have a great deal of time. James, remember, says our life's like a vapor. And as we just looked at a while ago, Psalms 90 and verse 10, the psalmist says you have 70, maybe 80 years. Now, some are blessed with a little bit longer and some with not as long time. But yet we understand that even in the time landscape with regards to, if you think about, I was thinking today, you know, if you live 100 years and you live and you figure that the earth is is 10,000 years of age, I think that means that you've only lived 1/100th of the time here upon the face of the earth that the earth has been in existence. You see, time has a way of getting by, and it gets by quickly. It gets by shortly, and we have to learn to value it. We have to learn that it's precious. It's a precious commodity, which cannot be given out and shared without thinking about. You see, if we understand and value our time, we'll make sure that we make good choices with how we use our time. Valuing our time, though, can go to an extreme. I know an individual that basically there are things that he would not do with you and things that he would do with you, but it was all because he said, well, my time's valuable. Well, your time is as valuable as my time is. And he often came in late to meetings, and he would show up and he said, well, my time's valuable. Well, mine is too, and I've been sitting here waiting on you. We need to learn to value our time, but value other people's time as well. And if we value our time, then we're going to learn, secondly, that we really need to spend our time and live with a purpose. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15, Paul says, see then that you walk circumspectly. Upright is the words. The word has the connotation of good, morally good, but in a good way. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the times, for the days are evil. Paul would write to the church at Ephesus, and he'd say, don't walk as the foolish people. Don't walk as the people that are unwise. Don't walk as the evil people walk. But walk godly. Do not walk as the fools, but walk as the wise. Walk with a definite purpose in mind. In Psalm 118, verse 24, a verse which my mother encouraged me years ago, she said, this ought to be, in many ways, one of the themes in your life. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. If you notice there and you know the text, you might say, preacher, you changed a word there. And I did. It says, we will rejoice and be glad in it. But he says, this is the day that the Lord has made. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that here's a day that God has given to us. It's a gift, and so therefore it's precious. It's a gift, and therefore it should be taken care of. It's a gift, and therefore it should not be considered lightly. And so you do the first thing, you value that time. But now you're living with purpose. What does my life mean? Why am I living my life? And how am I living my life? You see, the why am I living my life is found in the fact that we are God's creation. We are to live to his glory and to his honor. The how we live our life is how we spend our time. And if we live life with a purpose, we walk not as fools, but as wise. Then Paul says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16, we're going to redeem the time. The word redeem there, when we think of redeem, we think of redemption. And that's fair to think of it in that terms. But the word that Paul uses there in Ephesians 5, verse 16, where he says redeem, means to make good use of your time. Redeeming the time. Make good use of your time. Live with a purpose. Live with a direction in life. I read a story back several years ago of folks that were on an airplane. And as they were riding to their destination, or at least what they thought that was their destination, the pilot came over the intercom system. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that we have gone through some turbulence." But he said, "Also know that we have lost our navigational beam and we've lost our compass. And so we don't know where we are. And to be honest, we have lost our speed. We don't know how fast we're going, but we do know that we have a tremendous tailwind that is pushing us on. So while we don't know where we're going and we don't know the direction that we're going, we do know that we're making good time getting there." Well, that's the way a lot of folks live their life. Going, but never going in a particular direction. Many ways we have to limit our commitments. Life is sort of like a grocery store list. Do I get this week? Do I get this week? Do I get this week? And a lot of folks, while you make grocery lists, if it's towards the end of the month and the money's running low the month, you might say, well, I can do without this week, and I can do without this week, and I can get that next week when it's the first of the month and I have a little bit more money, or I won't need as many items. And you pick and choose. You see, we live with a purpose and a direction, making wise choices as we go. But in spending our time wisely, we also have to remember God. We also have to remember to place God as priority in our life. Virtually you might say, really, with your time, if you're going to value it and you're going to try to live with a purpose, then you've really got to prioritize your time. And as you prioritize your time in life, God should come first. The 10 Commandments that Moses received in Mount Sinai in Exodus, the 20th chapter. Do you remember there? First one, you shall have no other gods before me. God says, I'm number one in your life. Nobody else. Me, I come first. I am your number one priority. In life, we need to remember that we spend our time on our number one priority. God is first. We looked a little bit this morning in Colossians chapter 1, in which Paul was praying for the church at Colossae. And as he's praying for this great church, he makes the statement there in Colossians chapter 1 and verse 10, with regards to how they walk. He says that you might walk worthy of the Lord. That was his prayer for the church of Colossae. That was part of it, that is, that you would walk worthy of the Lord in all things, pleasing, being fruitful in every good work. The idea of walking worthily is the idea of walking in a worthy manner. Walk like God would have you to walk. Walk in a way that God has instructed you to walk. Walk with God. And so when we prioritize our time, God is first. That means when we begin to plan our day, when we begin to plan our calendar, we begin to plan our year, the thing that we put first. In other words, this is what's going to be accomplished today. God comes first. Well, then what falls in line with that? Well, family should come second, the work of the church should come next, and then work itself, and then relaxation and recreation. But God should be first as we prioritize our time, as we spend our time with God, for God. We make sure that we arrange our days, we arrange our calendars. So many times it's if we have anything left over. If we have any time left over, God, we'll serve you today. If we have any time left over, we'll read your word. If we have any time left over, we'll pray to you. If we have any time left over, we'll serve others, and thus you'll be glorified in our service of others. But that's really not the way it should work. As we prioritize our time and remember God in that prioritization, we live our lives in such a way that we remember that He's first. Stories told of a man that was talking to and lecturing a bunch of high-powered achievers, overachievers, really, in life. And he told them, he said, okay, it's time for a quiz. And out from a counter where they could not see, he pulls out a container. It's a gallon container. And he puts several large rocks about the size of small fist in them. And he asks, he says, he fills the container full. He says, is the container full? And everybody said, oh, yes, container is full. And he said, really? And they said, oh, yes. And so he reached under the table and he pulled out a bucket of gravel. And he poured the gravel in this container now. And he got that up to the top. And he said, well, is the bucket full? And many of them said, well, yes, it is. And one person said, oh, no, it's not. And he said, you're catching on. And so he reached under the table and he pulled out a bucket of sand. And he poured the sand in the bucket. And he filled, or the gallon container, and he filled it up. Now think about it. It's got larger rocks. It's got smaller rocks. Now it's got sand. He says, is it full? And somebody caught on and said, no, it's not full yet. And he said, how right you are. And he reached under the counter again. And he pulled out a bucket of water, and he poured water in that gallon container. So now the gallon container has larger rocks. It has gravel. It has sand. It has water. Is it full now? Yes, it's full. And so the speaker asked, he said, what do we learn out of this? What's the point of this illustration? And one individual raised his hand and he said, well, the point is that regardless of how full your schedule is, if you try really hard, you can always fit something else into it. And the speaker replied and said, no. He said, that's not it at all. You've missed the point. He said, the point of the illustration, the truth of the illustration is this. It's to teach us that if you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never get them in at all. And so many times, you see, we arrange our life by the immediate and what seems to be pressing. And our time should be prioritized with God first. So we put those big rocks in first. And then we fill our container of life, our time, with everything else. But then let me give you one last food for thought this evening. And that is, spend your time treating others kindly. I was reading the other day in Acts chapter 20. Paul was bidding farewell to the church at Ephesus. He'd been there for 3 years, for the most part of 3 years, and he's telling them goodbye. We made reference to this here a couple of weeks ago, in which he talked about take heed. He talked in talking to the elders. He said, take heed, therefore, unto yourself and the whole flock, over which the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, depending upon the version that you're using, has made you overseers. Well, that's part of that. And Paul ends that speech. Paul ends talking to the folks there. And there's a beautiful scene right there in verses 37 and 38 that when Paul finished what he said, it says they wept freely and they fell on Paul's neck and they kissed him, sorrowing most of all for the fact that words that he spoke, but that they would see his face no more. And they accompanied him to the ship. That was a going away party, wasn't it? That was a farewell party. They thought, they knew, we won't see you again. And so they fell upon his neck. They kissed him. They did what they could. They said, it's not just the words that you're saying, but it's the fact that you're not going to be around anymore. They treated him kindly. We need to spend our time being sure that we're the Good Samaritans. We're the individuals that stop and help people, that we show compassion towards others. that as we have opportunity, we're to do good. Paul said in Galatians 6, verse 10, especially to those of the household of faith. Time spent helping others. Maybe it's a neighbor that has something going on, so to speak, an ox in the ditch. Maybe they're working on a project around their house and they could use some help. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's someone across town that you just know needs a little help. Maybe it's someone that just needs a day brightened by a smile. Maybe it's just by holding a door open for someone or letting someone go in front of you at the door. Maybe it's just a kind act of whatever you can imagine. A preacher friend of mine back years ago, had these business cards printed up. And on the front, it's had the letters R-A-K, RAK. And what he would get his folks to do is he would give them those cards, and they would then go about, and because on the back it had the name of the church and an invite to come and be with them in their time of services. And the members then would do something, and then for people, and then hand them this card. You might say, well, what does RAK stand for? RAK, R-A-K, stood for Random Act of Kindness. And so when they did a random act of kindness, they'd just give them that card, or maybe they'd go up and rake somebody's leaves in the fall without those folks knowing it. And they'd just leave the card, RAK, Random Act of Kindness, an invite to come to church. Well, that's the way we spend time. That's a wonderful way to spend time, by treating others kindly. Each day I'll do a golden deed by helping those who are in need. My life on earth is but a span. Yeah. We need each day to do a golden deed. Dear friends, I hope maybe this has given you some food for thought. I hope as you begin the new year that you'll think about making sure you use your time and you use it wisely. We thank you for listening. I look forward to being with you in person Wednesday night. May God bless you and keep you is my prayer. Hope you have a good evening.